Welcome to the 2023 Dialed MTB Trail Bike Shootout overall ranking video. Thank you all for following along for this series, and it's been super fun to do it and to see all the comments from all you guys, reply to everyone, and just talk to all you in the comments of all these different videos. So keep that coming, keep commenting on these videos, keep coming on the last videos. I'll reply to them all. It's been really fun, and especially seeing all the new subscribers. So welcome to this channel to all of you, and tell your friends about it if you ride bikes and all of that. So let's get into it. This is going to be the final review video for me where I rank all 6 bikes for my personal self, my own personal reasoning on 6th place all the way to 1st place, and why I put each one of those bikes in that specific position. And remember, all these bikes are amazing. It's 2023. You can hardly buy a bad full suspension mountain bike right now. So all of these, I think, is some of the best bikes you can buy in 2023. I do want to say sorry that a couple bikes that were mentioned by you guys in the comments, I really wanted them. I reached them out to the manufacturers. They never got back to me, which were the Yeti SB140. I really wanted that to be in this video. Didn't make it. I couldn't afford to just go buy one. 4 of these bikes I did buy, and 2 of them were sent to me by Pivot and SCOR, which was awesome. Thank you to those 2 manufacturers. Okay, so now let's talk about the ranking system that I was gonna do for all these bikes. So we're doing a 1 through 10 for climbing, descending, fun factor, and value. And value is gonna be based on, I know it's an expensive number, but it seems like this was just the closest comparison that I could do. Any bike that was close to that $7,000 range, and what comes with the bike in that range. So for $7,000 is gonna be kind of the value point for me. I know that's not a value bike, but what you're getting for 7 grand, because that is a lot of money, and you should expect to get a lot of things for 7 grand. So that's where the value is coming in. All right, and then the next bike that I really wanted to get on test was that Trek Fuel EX. I tried reaching out to Trek, didn't hear from them. I emailed like 10 different emails that I could find, couldn't find it anywhere. I called all the local bike shops, they aren't demoing them. So I tried, I couldn't go spend another 15 grand or something on those bikes. So sorry, I couldn't do it. Hopefully in another video, maybe Trek and Yeti will hop on the Dialed MTB bandwagon and send some bikes for another future video, which I think would be sick. So maybe email them. I don't know what it would be. Maybe it's the customers that got to email those companies and say, hey, send bikes to these people. We want to hear from everyone. But anyways, let's move on from that, and let's get into these bikes and talk about them. All right, so let's jump into it. 6th place we're gonna talk about first is the SCOR 4060 ST. Which it really feels wrong putting this bike in 6th because these bikes are all so good, but one of the bikes had to be there. And I truly believe that for some people, this bike would be number 1. So let's jump into that. For me, the reason why it was number 6, it just never felt super comfortable for me. It didn't have that confidence going down the hill, really ever. It was just a bike that I always had to kind of guess on instead of just ride and think about the fun that I was having. But with that, I really think that this bike would shine if you guys have trails that are like really rolling up and down terrain, and maybe not the most rocky or the steepest terrain. I really think that this bike would probably jump up to the top of this whole category, or top 2 or top 3. So like, take my personal reasoning with a grain of salt, I guess, but this is my opinion. This is 6. So with that, let's move on to number 5, and that is gonna be the Pivot Switchblade. So the Pivot Switchblade, this was a tough one. This bike is really good. I liked it. Like I said, it's so comfortable. It's the Cadillac. I said it the whole time. It is such a comfortable bike, but with that, it never did anything amazing besides being comfortable. And yeah, you want to be comfortable on a bike, but you really also want to climb fast or descend fast, or one of the other, or both. Or you want to pop and do jumps really big. So let's talk the climbing for the 4060 ST. That is 8 out of 10 for me. It was a great climber. no big complaints. And then let's move on to descending, which that was a 6.5. It just never really got comfortable for me. It had some glimpses of hope and brightness and all that, and I could see how it could be really good, but it never really got really good for me, like I said. But it was still a great bike though. Overall, it was still a really good descending bike, and if you're coming from any other bike, that's gonna do a really good job. So then let's go on to the fun factor. It was a 7. It was fun, like it was poppy and playful and all that, but I didn't have the confidence, so it wasn't as fun as what it could have been if I had more confidence, where that came from. And then let's go into value next, which I gave it a 7 at $71.99. It comes with the carbon frame and then a GX build, not GX Axis, just regular GX, and it comes with RockShox it comes with all the RockShox Ultimate suspension. It comes with GX carbon cranks, and it comes with Code RC brakes. So it comes with everything that you need. Good brakes, good suspension, and GX drivetrain, which is solid. So not bad, not great, but a 7 for value compared to everything else. So with that, let's move into the pivot Switchblade. All right, so moving into 5th overall, which was the pivot Switchblade. This one, again, it was tough to put the pivot in 5th. It won its category, I guess, against the SCOR, but still, it won its category. It was so comfortable. I talked about that with you, all that. It was the Cadillac. I said that so many times. It's so comfortable. And with that, though, I never had anything that was really great at besides being comfortable. And with a bike, I want it to be fun. I want to descend fast. Or if it doesn't descend fast, I want to climb fast. And it didn't. It was the slowest climber on test, and it was not the fastest descender. It wasn't the most confident descender. It was good all across the board at everything. It was solid at it, but it wasn't the best at anything, and it just kind of slotted right in there. And also, I think the geometry is just a little outdated. I think that if this bike had some slacker head tube angles and a little bit steeper seat tube, maybe not a crazy bit steeper seat tube, because they already did pretty good on that, but like if everything was just a little bit more closer to everything else, maybe it would have been a few positions higher, 1st, 2nd, or 3rd. Like I could easily see that happening. It has such a good platform with that DW Link suspension. It is such a solid bike. So it being in 5th does not mean anything, but I do think if it did have more modern geometry, it would be more comfortable on the descent, and it would really excel and could jump way up in this field of bikes. So I kind of think that Pivot is probably going to be coming out with a new Switchblade soon. I have that's coming from nowhere. It seems like Pivot comes out with winter, like late winter releases, so maybe February or March, but I could see that happening. I could see a new Switchblade coming in like early 2024, and that bike may just destroy all of these bikes. We don't know. I could definitely see that because Pivots are rad bikes. But with that, let's talk about that scale. Let's talk about climbing first. So I gave the Pivot a 7 on the climb. It's not the fastest. It might have been the slowest, but it was so comfortable. It still got a 7. It didn't go below that because of the feel you have on the climb. And then let's go to descending. It was a 7.5. It wasn't the best. It wasn't the worst. It was comfortable. It was what it was. 7.5 is still a solid score. So it can get better, yes. Does it need to get better? Probably not. But with that, let's go to the fun factor, which that was just a solid 7, just right there. Once again, it was fun. It was comfortable. You could get along with it. It was a pretty dang good bike all around. It was, yeah. All right, so now let's talk about value for the Switchblade. So in my comparison video, I literally just looked up prices on their website, and that $69.99 X01 Pro build is now gone. So that bike is gone, which that would have probably given this like an 8.5 or a 9 for value, but it dropped it down to 8. The reason why I went to 8, it's still a really good value, which I thought was crazy. I did not think pivot was going to be in 80% value, you know? Like, that's crazy to me. Like, I always thought they were so boutique and so expensive, but they've really worked on their pricing, it seems like, and they still have a build that I think is at $56.99, but the bike that I'm basing it off of is $76.99, and you can get it in regular or Fox Live Valve, which is crazy. Fox Live Valve is a very, very expensive suspension system, and it's $76.99, and it's an XT-XTR build, so it's got all XT or XTR components on it, from drivetrain to brakes and all of that, and then it has got some race face cranks and carbon pivot bars and all of that, so it's a super solid build, and that's why it's getting an 8. So with that, let's move to 4th overall, and man, this one was a tough one. All right, so moving to 4th overall, this was the hardest decision of this entire test. This was something that I didn't think was going to be in 4th. I predicted this one to be a lot better off, which we're going to talk about in a second, but it was so close to 3rd. 4th comes in, though, with the Santa Cruz Hightower. And I do want to say right away, this bike, well, Santa Cruz in general, I have really, really enjoyed Santa Cruz over the last few years. I've had so many of their bikes. I almost always have a Santa Cruz in my garage for my personal bike. And this Hightower was my personal bike. And then I started doing this test, and it made me realize, oh wow, there's some other bikes that I actually like better. So I sold that bike. It was mine. I no longer have it, but I do want to let you know that it was super tough for me. And I think that if you do buy this bike, or if you already have it, you're going to be 100% stoked with it. This bike is awesome. There's nothing majorly wrong with it, but there was a few bikes that did things a little better in my opinion. Also, I wanted to be just very honest and upfront with you. That's why I didn't move it to 3rd. In my heart, I wanted it to be 3rd. I wanted to move it up to 3rd and move the other bike back, but I had to be honest with you, and it's 4th place. But with that, in 4th place, it is a very comfortable, confident descender. It climbs well. It doesn't climb amazing, I don't think, but like, it climbs good. Santa Cruz bikes aren't always the fastest, and you shouldn't expect that really when you're buying a Santa Cruz, but they climb in, the top 75% of all bikes probably, I'd say, and it descends. That rear end, like I talked about, that rear end is so freaking good. It is really impressive, and it really just kind of shines that bike up even more. So I want to say that, but overall, bike's awesome. Let's get into the ranking system though. So climbing, the bike is an 8 out of 10 to me. It's solid. It's better than most of the bikes, but not as good as some, and it's just a confident climber. It has a lot of traction, but with that, let's go to descending. This is going to be kind of easy. It's another 8. Descends so confident, so easy, just smooth going. Santa Cruz bikes, for me personally, are one of the most comfortable bikes that I ride, that I get on, and I just instantly feel comfortable on. And then, once again, let's go to fun factor, another 8. It's just kind of 8s across the board for me. We get to the value in a minute, that one, but the fun factor is, it's good. It's all there. It's got everything you need. A bike that has 8s across the board is rad. Like, you don't need to say much more. So that bike is good. And this is kind of, if you would have asked me 6 months ago if I would have given Santa Cruz this value, I would have been laughed at, and I would have laughed at myself as well. But going through all these builds and the current sale prices that Santa Cruz has, they have an X01 cable bike on sale for $71.99, which is like the same price as the SCOR. It comes with Fox Factory suspension up front, the Fox Factory 36, RockShox Super Lux rear shock, X01 drivetrain, Code RSC brakes, and Santa Cruz has maybe one of the best warranties in this whole test. I haven't had to deal with Ibis, Pivot, or We Are One. I haven't heard much about them. I'm assuming they're all really good, but I think that it's gonna get a 9 value, which is crazy to me. And then with that, just a little side note, they came out with like a 23.5 model or whatever with the SRAM transmissions, and they have an XO transmission at $79.99, which that is the cheapest in this category to get a SRAM transmission. So who would have thought that Santa Cruz would have the cheapest bike to get into a certain level, which is that SRAM transmission? It's just weird to me. But anyways, let's move on. All right, so here we go. Finally making it to the top 3. You might have guessed which one is in third. Maybe you didn't, but it is the Ibis Ripmo. This just barely beat out that Hightower, but I think it beat it with some good reason. So with that, this bike kind of has an attitude to just make you want to go fast and carry a bunch of speed. And then with that, it also climbs really well. It just feels like you can keep pushing and it just wants to keep going faster and faster on the climb. And it's a weird feeling for how big the bike is. It's got a Fox 38 on it. It's the only bike in test was a Fox 38, which yes, maybe it shouldn't have been in this test because it has a 38 on it. But I really thought that it kind of still slotted in that trail category. I think if it had a 170 fork on it, it would be out of this test. But man, it really climbs out of its league for where it's at, in my opinion, and it descends just with that intention of speed like I talked about. So with that, awesome bike. Let's go into the rankings. So climbing, it is just a little bit better than that Hightower at an 8.5. And like I said, it's a little bit more traction, I think, on the rockier sections, like the true rock, just straight rock. It might be a little better than that Hightower. I think that has to do with that DW link. Going to the descents, it gets an 8.5, and this is how it beat the Hightower. So it's got an 8.5 on the descents, where the Hightower has an 8. It just has first off, you can go faster on this bike, in my opinion. You can go faster through rough, steeper stuff for sure with this bike. The rear end's not quite as good as that rear end of the Hightower, but man, it can just plow down. And the rear end, you can always let it kind of just bounce around with you. If you're a good enough rider, or even if you're really not, like, you can kind of let that rear end just kind of move as it wants to. And the front end, it just feels so good. So with that, that was where it's at. And then the fun factor is an 8. So it's actually the same fun factor as the Hightower. It's poppy and playful. Not quite as poppy and playful as some other bikes, but one of the top 3, top 4 on this test for poppiness. And it's a fun bike. So overall, let's go into the value. So value is at 8.5, so 0.5 lower than that Hightower. It is $72.99 for an XO1 factory suspension build. It comes with a Fox Factory 38, Fox Factory X2 rear shock. So a little bit more expensive suspension than that Hightower had. But it's XO1 everything. It does come with XO1 carbon cranks over the X1 carbon cranks on that Hightower, which the X1 carbon cranks, I don't know if you know, but it's more like a GX carbon crank than an XO1. A lot of people think it's XO1, but it's not. So it's an 8.5 value for me, pretty solid. Ibis did just bump their 7-year warranty on their frames. I believe it was 7 years, all the way up to a lifetime. So that is awesome to see from them. That means that they're just really standing behind their product. And it's cool to see that they just changed it. Like right after COVID, they're just like, hey, look, here we go. We trust our product and we know it's gonna be good. So with that, let's get to the runner-up of the 2023 Dial M to Be Trail Bike Shootout runner-up, I guess. But yeah, so it is the Transition Smuggler. This bike, it was close to getting to first, top step of the shootout, but the reason why it's in second, we've got a few reasons, but let's get into why it is in second and why it's so good. So the Specialized Stump Jumper, the new one that just came out, that 130, 140 one that came out like in 2021, I believe, it took all the traits I loved about that bike and then got rid of the negative ones that I didn't like, and then added the transition flare, which is going down hills so good and so fun, and it created the Smuggler, which is kind of like, it is the bike that I wanted the Specialized Stump Jumper to be, and I really, really love that bike. That was one of my favorite trail bikes that I've ever rode until I got to 2023 and did all these trail bike shootouts. So yeah, with that, it is truly an amazing bike to ride, and the reason why it is in second, not maybe the reason, I actually do think the bike that won would still beat it, but it had some issues, and I talked about that in the head-to-head video. I realized that I didn't put the pictures of the cable routing in, so we're gonna put that in right now. And pause that. If you needed to go back, go check it out, pause it. But the cable routing was really bad, and I thought it was absolutely terrible. As I talked about in that video, it just didn't make sense, and then the tire rubbing, and I've now recently just got some more chips in the rear triangle just from how close it is, and so that's kind of just, it just knocked it down a step. So with that, I think everyone knows it's time for the 2023 Dialed MTB Trail Bike Shootout winner, which is the We Are One Arrival 152. So with that, why did this bike win? It kind of has some magic in it that is undescribable and also kind of unfair to all the rest of the bikes. I don't know what We Are One did, but they really did something special here. It descends better than every other bike here. It climbs top 2 out of all the bikes here. It was one of the fastest climbers that I did in my little climbing test that I did. I didn't really put the numbers out, but it was the fastest. They were on, there was 3 separate days that I did them all on. So it was on the fastest day. It did feel like the ground was the hardest and fastest, so that's why I scrapped that, but it was the fastest out of all of them. And it is just the most comfortable climber, the most comfortable descender, and it's even more comfortable than that pivot that I talked about. It's just kind of crazy how good it is at everything. As I talked about in the head-to-head comparison video, which you guys should go watch if you have not watched it yet. It goes up against the Ibis Ripmo, which is an amazing bike in itself, but it is the most balanced bike that I've ever rode. It just feels like you are just controlling every single ounce of that bike, and I've never had a feeling like that on any other bike that I've ever rode. But with that, let's talk about 2 negatives. One really being a bigger issue to me is the height of the seat tube. The seat tube is pretty dang high. I actually just got back from Colorado, brought that bike there, rode it the entire time, and that seat height, I'm a size medium. I can usually run between 175 to 200 millimeter drops on all other bikes in this test or any other bikes currently, and I can only run a 150 on this bike, which is a bummer. And I noticed that, like 2 years ago, 150 was completely normal for me and was fine, but that seat was just hitting me and hitting me and hitting me, and it was kind of annoying. I didn't ever think that that was that big of a deal. Until I went to somewhere steeper than Boise, and it was really noticeable. And then with that, there is one other problem. It's not internally routed cables. I changed the brakes on it, and it was a pain. It was not an easy process, but most people don't have to deal with that, so that's not that big of a thing, so we're not going to talk about it much. But I did want to bring up some cons about this bike, which those 2 were the only 2 that I had. But other than that, this bike was amazing. But now let's talk about the ratings for the Arrival. It's the final deal. So the climbing is a 9. It is an amazing climber. It does not make sense how good this bike is at climbing. And then descending, it is a 10 out of 10. I could not ask for a better descender in this category. It gives you so much confidence. That balance that I talked about, it's like magic, like I've talked about. It doesn't make sense how good it is. And then the fun factor is 9.5. This bike, I know it's getting really high ratings, but if you've never looked into this bike or rode this bike, it is a special, special thing. And then with that, it's pretty crazy, but the value is also a 9. For $73.99, you get this full exact same carbon bike. You get carbon wheels, Industry 9 hubs, carbon bars, GX carbon cranks, I believe, as well. And it is just an amazing bike. All right, so with that, the We Are One Arrival is the only bike to have a rating above 9 in all 4 categories. So it goes 9 for climbing, 10 for descending, 9.5 for fun factor, and 9 for value. And I know value is a weird one because I'm ranking these all in the $7,000 price range. But with that, I'm gonna have a bonus video at the end of all these videos. It's gonna come out maybe a week after the last one. And it's gonna be talking about values of all of these bikes. And I'm gonna really dive in a little bit deeper for all of them. So tune into that if you wanna know about why I'm ranking these as I did for value. I think that's something that's very important for a consumer to know about. Value is a tough one, and I did an entire spreadsheet crazy thing. I wrote it all up and went back, and it was pretty eye-opening that some of these brands that I thought were so expensive actually had better component lists for similar prices or cheaper or $100 more than other manufacturers. But anyways, we'll talk about that all later. Let's talk about who won this contest. Did anyone guess all 6 correct? If you did and I missed it, let me know in the comments down below. I'm gonna get your contact info and I'm gonna send you something pretty cool. Not sure what it is yet, but we'll figure it out and I'll talk to you, see what kind of riding you do if you did guess them all right. And so once again, it's 6 is the SCOR 4060, 5th Switchblade, Pivot Switchblade, 4th Santa Cruz Hightower V3, 3rd Ibis Ripmo, 2nd Transition Smuggler, 1st We Are One Arrival. And with that, I am so happy for all you guys to tune in to this. This was a really big project for me. Like I said, it is now the end of June. I started this back in February, reaching out to a bunch of different companies. I want to say thank you again to Pivot and SCOR. They stepped up massively for sending me those bikes. Once again, it was not paid for, but they sent them to me at no cost to me, which is massive. That is huge. And I didn't want them to pay. I wanted to be able to do this 100%, my opinion. I've heard some other media outlets out there, like they take a lot of money, and I hope I never do that. So yeah, super excited for all of this. Let me know in the comments down below which ranking you would give each of these bikes. If you've rode multiple of these bikes, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of disagreeers, but this is, once again, my opinion, and I'm excited to give it to you all. And with that, like and subscribe for more like this. Hopefully we can do another shootout of this soon. We just need to grow this channel and get it to the point where we can continually do this 2-3 times a year, and that is my goal. And get out and ride.